Story 1. At one point, I sank so deep into depression that I stopped going to work, answering the phone, paying bills, and leaving the house. I was fired, had my car repossessed, and was evicted, but I didn't even care. If my mom hadn't stepped in and gotten me help, I think I would have just let myself waste away. I must add that when it was happening, I didn't even realize it. There was no breakup, death, or any notable trauma that triggered it. Going to work became increasingly difficult, and eventually everything turned into monumental tasks, even just texting. Showering, forget it. No dishes or food. Oh well, pay attention to the warning signs and take care of yourself. There was no moment when I thought, I must be depressed, before I was too far gone to seek help. Story 2. I know a man who was completely self-made, starting out delivering paper to offices and businesses for 2 years while learning how to service copy and fax machines. He then moved up to a service technician, advanced to a lead position, and eventually became the lead for an entire 3-state region. One night, he stole the company van, which was full of tools and equipment, sold it, and went on a 3-day binge. He had never done any hard drugs before. He was a secret drinker and everyone knew it, but he kept it at home and never brought it to the office. Then this happened. Story 3. I have been expecting too much from myself. I have pushed myself to the edge, thinking I should be further along in life and that I should have everything figured out by now. This mindset led to burnout, constant self-doubt, and criticism over every little mistake. Instead of growing, I was slowly tearing myself down, all because I couldn't accept that I am human and still learning. Story 4. My panic disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder flared so badly from a series of unfortunate events a few years ago that I stopped trying to live. I stopped eating and didn't want to leave the floor of my bedroom. I was scared of my own shadow. I had to go to an inpatient program that lasted for months. That program changed my life. I owe them everything. Story 5. A few years ago, I had a roommate who completely ruined his life for a girl. Our friend group had just moved to a new city together, fresh out of college with decent jobs, all single, living that young adult life. He had known this girl through mutual friends for a while. They hooked up occasionally, but he always swore he would never date her. Red flags? Oh, plenty. She had mental health struggles, couldn't hold a job, always some excuse. And eventually her life imploded. Since he was her only support, she guilt-tripped him into dating her. Then she moved in with us. Within 3 months, she couldn't work due to medical issues, but never seemed to get better. He kept taking time off to care for her and lost his remote job. Now they are both jobless, relying on the rest of us. Their brilliant solution? Let's live in a van to save money. He bought a junker and they vanished. Last I checked, they are still living in a van, still begging for work online. He went from stable income to homelessness in record time, all because he couldn't say no. Story 6. At my lowest point, I threw away all my photos and everything associated with my history. I wanted to erase myself, I guess. I was completely sober and couldn't face my reflection, thinking of all I had done to myself and inflicted on those I loved. I was self-harming and wanted to end my life. I really don't miss living like that anymore. I feel somewhat bitter at myself for destroying all my pictures of me and my family, but in the end, it's just material. I am glad to hear that you made it through to the other side and that you are back on track. Story 7. My dad was a tenured professor and published writer. He inherited about $30,000 from my mom when he was around 65 years old. 5 years later, he had spent it all. He was going bankrupt for the 3rd time and failing to fulfill a work contract. He took his own life. My mom was the one who always kept him together, even after their divorce. He remarried, but his new wife did not encourage him to get things done, so he fell apart. Story 8. I was 10 when my 15-year-old aunt started smoking to look cool. "Isn't that bad for you?" I asked. She told me not to be ridiculous and said, "Look at the label. I'm not pregnant, asthmatic, and I don't have a heart problem." 24 years later, after battling cancer for 8 years, undergoing a double mastectomy, and losing part of her colon, she was blind for about 7 months from a tumor in her brain. Then she died. Her youngest child, my second cousin, was still only 13. Story 9. My ex-wife lived a double life. In my life with her, she was a Christian woman, very moral, loved her kids, excelled at her job, and was very focused on her work. The other life I uncovered revealed that she was having affairs with her coworkers, which was surprising since she worked from home nearly 100% of the time. I discovered her affair with one coworker in another country and confronted her about it. She asked for a divorce, kicked me out of the house, and threatened to tell our children that I had abused her. She also set me up for a crime and succeeded in doing so. She attempted to publicize her affair with a married partner 2 months after our separation. Despite coming from an extremely Christian family, she faced more mental health issues, lost the divorce trial, lost her job due to the affair, and caused her family to fall apart. The kids no longer trust her, and she only has custody during some school breaks. She changed her name and moved 2,000 miles away to escape the damage she caused to her reputation and affected the jobs of 50 people because of the affair. While she now makes 10 times more than she did before, her employment success is the only positive aspect in her life at the moment. Story 10. I worked with a dedicated manager who decided to cheat on his partner during a staff night out. She immediately found out and ended the relationship. His drug habits spiraled out of control. He became addicted, lost his home, and his parents and family severed contact. The last I heard, he was living on the streets, completely strung out. Story 11. My wife of 2 years ended our marriage after 2 suicide attempts, 2 assaults on me, and cheating to stay with a man in his trailer. She bought a few goats and ducks and plans to live on her own across the country from any family she has. She is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so I suspect she is having a manic episode, as her actions and words are neither rational nor true, and she has no real plan for the future. She also has no money or possessions, has never worked for more than 3 months, was never able to save money when she had jobs, and does not have her driver's license. I wish I could help, but some people need to hit rock bottom and want assistance before anything changes. I would offer her money, but I know she would spend it unwisely. She quit medication and therapy right before all this happened. Then she assaulted me twice, the second time being the last straw for both of us, I guess. I saw it coming. Still hurts horribly. Story 12. One of my beautiful sisters, full of potential, struggled with addiction and faced multiple arrests. No matter what anyone tried, she just did not want to change. Story 13. Not me, but my neighbor was someone I considered a friend. He has 2 daughters and 2 sons. When his eldest daughter was 14, he started abusing her. He worked in online network support at night from home, so that's when he struck. After 2 years, he developed a conscience and stopped. He might have gotten away with it if his daughter hadn't gone to therapy and revealed what happened. His wife confronted him, and he actually tried to blame his daughter. He is now divorced with 4 children who absolutely hate him. He lives alone and is soon expected to be sentenced to prison. His ex-wife lives in another city. He can no longer walk around the neighborhood because most people know what he did. Story 14. As a child, I engaged in self-harm, drank excessively, and took risks. As an adult, I experience a quiet desire for everything to cease. However, I am in therapy. Story 15. It probably isn't the worst experience, but I went through severe hair loss from ages 20 to 23. It was so bad that I contemplated suicide, and I ended up working less, not performing to my potential in school, cutting off everyone in my social life, and missing many funerals of family and friends because of it. I stayed in my room for 3 years, just wasting time. I thought my life was over until I figured it out in January of this year, and it turned out to be related to severe weight loss. As of now, I'm slowly re-entering the world, and it feels strange. Story 16. I was friends with someone who could never let things go. She was formerly friends with my current best friend, and they had a falling out over a situation in their late teens that led to them not talking anymore. Even when they weren't talking, I heard both of them saying how much they cared for and missed the other person, so I assumed they would eventually work things out. Years later, I finally got them to talk, but she just refused to move on. After the air was cleared, she still took every opportunity to make little verbal jabs and comments about the other person. regardless of context or situation. Having known her for a while, it felt like another instance where she preferred to keep the anger alive rather than move on and be friends with the person she claimed to love. I'm not sure if it was a fear of things happening again or something else, but it was a self-destructive tendency I noticed in her. It makes me sad every time I think about it because I loved her quite a bit, and she was one of the smartest, funniest, kindest people I had ever known. However, when she felt wronged, she just couldn't move forward. In a different universe, there's a reality where all three of us probably live together or near each other and hang out all the time. Admittedly, I probably still wouldn't be able to ignore her if she ever reached out. Story 17. It's probably mild compared to all the others. I had a friend during college. He, a girl, and I had the highest grades from our first year, all nerds. In the second year, he discovered places in the city that organized long nights, where people could play games all night for a small fee. He started going to those long nights whenever he could, sometimes even 2 nights in a row. Fast forward 7 years, and all the guys from our friend group have well-paying jobs. We all became software developers. He, once the smartest of the group, now works in a factory for minimum wage. He stopped taking care of his body, is severely overweight, and has poor hygiene. Recently, he has begun expressing negative views about women and believes in harmful stereotypes, although he is rarely vocal about it, so it isn't too concerning. In the past few years, every time we met, all he talked about were video games, mostly Elden Ring and World of Warcraft. He plays them daily, often skipping sleep. His obsession with video games has destroyed him. Story 18. I was so depressed that I lost a $100,000 scholarship to a renowned art school. Home life was challenging, and once I graduated high school, my safety net disappeared. I was placed on academic probation before my first semester because my senior year grades were poor. I had to attend community college to demonstrate that I could earn better grades. I already felt defeated and believed I couldn't go to school like my friends. Everything seemed impossible. When my grades declined in community college, my parents kicked me out, sealing my fate and leading to the loss of that scholarship. Story 19. I recently ended a relationship with someone who was struggling after losing her father. She isolated herself and became overly dependent on me for support while I encouraged her to seek help, therapy, and involve her family. We had gone through difficult times together and were beginning to establish stability in our lives, but she became angry and broke up with me in a fit of rage. Subsequently, she self-harmed in front of me and admitted herself to an inpatient facility. When I acknowledged that the relationship was over and that I couldn't recover from her actions, which I considered abusive, especially since I had previously stated that self-harm in front of me was a boundary for me, she had already broken up with me a few months earlier, where I reiterated that I wouldn't be able to handle the ups and downs again. Immediately after our breakup, she returned to the kink community and started seeking new partners. I had stopped engaging with her and paused our 24/7 dynamic because I was concerned about her safety and her ability to manage her emotions. I worry about how she can practice responsible consent or submission when she currently lacks self-control and isn't in a place to listen to my concerns. I often lie awake thinking about the unethical individuals looking for play partners who may take advantage of her vulnerable state, and I hope that nothing harmful happens to her. I wanted to be in a relationship with her, to share a dynamic and engage with her. I just wanted her to slow down and prioritize her safety. Thank you for allowing me to share my feelings. Story 20. I have been actively engaging in dangerous and high adrenaline activities over the last few years, hoping that one of these experiences would lead to my demise. Thankfully, I have managed to survive several close calls. I have struggled with severe depression and a fractured sense of identity throughout my life, and the onset of schizoaffective disorder has pushed me further over the edge. It is nearly impossible for me to emotionally bond with others and form relationships. If I end up in an avalanche or crashing my car at high speed, then so be it. Story 21. When I was overly generous, I was spending too much money on others. I would occasionally buy them gifts, and they felt uncomfortable. It became unwieldy, and I lost control. Story 22. I sold my soul to Publix, a grocery store chain in the South. After spending 4.5 years homeless, all I wanted was to work hard, be seen, learn more, move up, and earn more money. I rode a bicycle 10 miles one way to work and 10 miles back. I was riding 100 miles a week in South Florida amid aggressive, distracted drivers. I stood on my feet for 5 to 8 hours, sometimes with no breaks. I worked hard behind colleagues with no work ethic and was often forced to close and open shifts, despite telling my shift managers that if I had to close, I would either not sleep or oversleep since I got maybe 3 hours of sleep between shifts. My route to and from work was the same. I could get to work in 45 minutes to an hour, but it took 2 to 3 hours to get home because I was so tired. On top of that, I faced extreme stress from navigating traffic every day. One day, I left my wallet at McDonald's, and when I realized it, I sat in the middle of the road and waited to be run over. I was already going to be late for work, exhausted, and now I had no money for lunch. I ended up being involuntarily committed for 3 days, but with a combination of many factors, I kept my job. That wasn't the last time I had issues. One time, someone drove 30 miles per hour through the parking lot around a blind corner and nearly hit me with a cart. If they had struck me, I could have been seriously injured or killed. I ended up in the break room, experiencing such a severe mental breakdown that I was suspended for a week because they believed I was making real threats. Finally, near Christmas Eve, I experienced extreme sleep issues. My body would stay awake until 6 a.m., at which point I would black out from exhaustion due to high stress and anxiety levels. I exercised the day before to tire myself enough to sleep, knowing I would work 10 hours on Christmas Eve. Yet again, I stayed awake all night, passed out at 5 a.m., and woke up 2 hours late. It took me an hour to get ready for work, and then an hour to get halfway across town. I eventually gave up and started thinking about something that would get me banned from social media. That's when I realized my mental health was more important than this job. A similar situation happened 4.5 years ago, leading to that entire period of homelessness. Thankfully, I had a support group and I didn't get kicked out of where I was living. It has been 1 year and 4 months of self-examination, therapy, and programs, and I think I'm finally ready to work and stop living in poverty. Story 23. 2 months ago, my 15-year-old son went from being a loving child with some teenage issues to dropping out of school, running away from home, associating with the wrong crowd, and engaging in stealing and hurting others. He is now facing over a dozen criminal charges and possible juvenile detention. At this point, he isn't using drugs, so there's that. From what we can see, a combination of insecurity, poor choices, social media influence, and making emotional rather than logical decisions led him to this situation. We love him deeply, and our hearts break for him. It wasn't meant to be this way. Story 24. I had a friend who accidentally blew off his hand with a homemade pipe bomb. On the way to the hospital, he attempted to steal a police officer's gun to harm himself and injure the officer in the process. Serving time in jail without a hand is challenging. Story 25. I worked with a colleague who was a severe narcissist. He was a very successful surgeon, perhaps a professional who attracts that personality type. However, he attempted to coerce and control everything and everyone around him to the point of eventual implosion. When you mistreat and intimidate everyone you meet, you will eventually encounter obstacles that won't yield to your aggression. He lost his hospital privileges for abusing his ex-wife, who was also a surgeon there. He ultimately faced repercussions from the medical governing body for abusive behavior and alcohol misuse, leading to disciplinary action. He also encountered difficulties with law enforcement. One night, while intoxicated, he fled from the police in his Porsche, which he had previously boasted about doing. The town only had one silver 911 on the road, so they knew where to find him the following morning. He was arrested in the hospital parking lot, and he was still under the influence when he arrived at work to perform surgery. He lost both his driver's license and medical license. Tragically, he ultimately took his own life. While I cannot say I shed a tear, I do feel for the unfortunate family members he left behind. Story 26. Falling for someone who made me feel alive while I was struggling inside. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, smiled all day, and bled all night. The worst part? I would have done it again just to feel them once more. Story 27. My ex is a long and incredibly tragic story. She pushed everyone away who could help, including her boyfriend of almost 8 years. Apparently, everything I did for her meant absolutely nothing. If the full story is desired, just let it be known and I'll be happy to share. Story 28. I helped a friend who voluntarily became a heroin addict. On day 0, he had never tried heroin. By day 1, he snorted heroin. On day 3, he injected it for the first time. By day 14, his bank account was empty, and he had sold all his personal items. Less than a year later, he was in and out of prison and had stolen money from his own child, family, and friends. He is probably dead now. I have no clue. Story 29. Alcoholism, a bad divorce, and post-traumatic stress disorder from my job in the military, along with finding the lifeless body of my friend in the barracks, all rolled into one massive depressive episode. I went from a strong sergeant with 8 years of service to an empty shell of a person who would turn off the lights in my barracks room and start consuming excessive amounts of alcohol while contemplating suicide. Thus began my toxic relationship and dependency on alcohol that I am still struggling with. I will not delve into the legal issues I have caused for myself or how difficult it is to motivate myself to get out of bed each day. Story 30. I work in emergency services. Over the course of about 5 years, I gradually developed a severe case of post-traumatic stress disorder. I started having trouble sleeping due to anxiety after responding to a couple of brutal homicide scenes. One involving children and the other where a woman was strangled with a toilet plunger handle forced down her throat. I entered a unit where everything was very high risk. I experienced performance anxiety at work because I struggled to excel in my job. I'm not a quitter, and I tried my best to work through it. I started relying on physical relationships with various women to cope with my anxiety. One of my best friends took his own life a few years ago, and I ended up meeting a girl whom I dated for a year and a half the day after his death. Looking back now, I realized she was likely a crutch for my depression and anxiety. She often had men on the periphery of our relationship, which increased my anxiety at home as well as at work. Coupled with the depression from losing my friend, I began to spiral, even though I was able to hide it outwardly. I turned back to women, but I didn't want an emotional connection, so I started messaging escorts. I had no intention of meeting them. Just the conversations provided me with a temporary boost to offset my depression. Several near-life-threatening incidents throughout the year led to the development of my post-traumatic stress disorder. I began experiencing night terrors, insomnia, and aggressive behavior. The compulsive messaging eventually turned into actually seeing an escort. I managed to regain some control after a couple of months, but I was eventually identified since I worked closely with law enforcement. Now I'm suspended and my girlfriend left. I'm uncertain if I will keep my job. It has been a challenging time. Lots of therapy, medication, and support from good friends have kept me alive. Not a day goes by that I don't consider ending it, but at least I can manage it now. My capacity for compassion has grown tremendously. I wish this on nobody. Story 31. Not quite a full self-destruction, but as close as Icarus could get to the sun without burnt wings. I reconnected with an old friend in 2020, just before COVID-19, and started a relationship. I was so in love that I didn't notice her constantly bringing me down. I lost relationships with half of my family, nearly lost my career of over 8 years, lost my friends, developed a crippling alcohol addiction, and spent every last dime on her. You name it. Once I reached rock bottom and had nothing left, she kicked me out. I found myself homeless, penniless, and working from coffee shops since my office was still closed at the time. I managed to finally turn things around, and while I'm still not completely back, I am making progress. The experience was intense, though. Story 32. I found a shiny golem, but before I could catch it, it used self-destruct. I couldn't even get a false swipe off. Story 33. Well, after I separated from my soon-to-be ex-wife, I turned to alcohol and was on the verge of a severe mental health crisis, which pushed me over the edge. I am still trying to pick myself back up and return to where I was before. It's time for therapy and medication again. I have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and bipolar 2 and will be starting mood stabilizers soon. Story 34. I took antidepressants without a prescription, and the side effects were even worse. My jaw was shaking and I couldn't sleep. Story 35. I watched many people believe that Molly was the ultimate solution to their problems. Selling drugs in the country is not a profitable business. I do not want to discuss it in detail, but if you learn something from your past, it can be a positive experience. I got in trouble for convincing someone to surveil a man from Hawaii. They completely disrupted my life because they would never acknowledge that it was a black man. Story 36. One of the managers who interviewed me was a German, very sociable, and easygoing guy. Everyone loved him. We had an outdoor office party with a 1970s theme. There were free props, food, and drinks, with a band playing on stage. I saw him 4 times that night. The first time was filled with banter, but by the last time he could barely walk or string 2 words together. I was enjoying the atmosphere, so I danced all night without noticing anyone or anything else. The next day, I found out that he had an encounter with a 20-year-old behind one of the tents, and everyone could see him. He got fired, his wife left him, and his children refused to talk to him. The last I heard, he was considered unhireable, since the story spread quickly throughout the small island. Story 37. I knew a guy in high school. He was using drugs in a sequence. He started with H and actually managed to continue until he reached M, where he got stuck. The last time I saw him was about 2 years after graduation on a bus. He looked like a walking skeleton. He asked to borrow some money, so I gave him $20 and made him promise to at least get some food. That was the last I saw of him. Story 38. I have a good friend who is a career bartender. He is social, funny, and extremely talented. However, over the past 4 to 5 years, he has been in a cycle where he excels at a new bar for a while and then around the 6-month mark gets fired for being intoxicated while on duty. Luckily, he recently moved back in with his mother and stepfather in another state, and they have a no-drinking rule, which is helping him sober up. Story 39. Back when I was a high school math teacher, one of the other male teachers was caught sexting and engaging with female students. I had never seen him act or do anything inappropriate during school hours. The staff and most of the students were shocked when he was discovered. He was arrested at the school on a day when it was closed for administrative meetings, so only teachers were on campus. I had just arrived, and there were several police cars near the front office. I walked in and saw him in handcuffs, head down, being escorted out by the police. He lost his job, years of college wasted, his career as a teacher over, felony convictions, years in prison, and his own family destroyed. He probably caused a lifetime of therapy for the girls he hurt and now faces a lifetime on the sex offender registry. I have no idea what happened to him after all that, nor do I care. He's a terrible person. Story 40. When I was struggling with alcoholism, I would sometimes spend days in bed, wake up hungover, and go back to bed after taking a shot. This would continue until I ran out of alcohol, and I would be so hungover that I needed a friend to bring me hydration and some food. Story 41. A very intelligent classmate of mine graduated high school and was accepted into Duke University on a full academic scholarship. He aspired to become a doctor but indulged too much in partying, leading to issues with alcohol and cocaine. This ultimately resulted in a felony charge, being expelled from school, and his parents placing him in rehabilitation due to the severity of the situation. During my last visit home, I saw him working the drive-thru at a local restaurant. I could only shake my head when he handed me my food. Story 42. It's happening right now. I am pursuing a research master's degree and need to submit an 80-page dissertation in A4 format for the first year. I won't be able to hand it in. I've barely done anything. I am just not able to work. But I can't give up either. It would put me in a tough spot. I think I am depressed. Story 43. I went solo to a South American country and quickly realized it was not a place I should be. I proceeded with my foolishness and found out pretty quickly. I faced a police setup after I bought some street drugs. Just a minute earlier, my friend was telling me that I should avoid this situation. So I evaded that stop and search in the cab. There was one attempted robbery incident involving scopolamine, and then a successful abduction and robbery a week later. I've seen some places, and there are others where I don't think most foreigners would survive to tell the cool stories. I wasn't trying to put myself in that situation. Story 44. Gary Warren Hart. In the mid-1980s, Gary Hart, often referred to as the new Jack Kennedy, was poised to be the Democratic nominee and potentially the next president. He was young and good-looking compared to his opponents, and he had a certain charm and humor. He even made an appearance as himself on the hit TV show Cheers. However, one significant problem emerged. He was perceived as being too much like John F. Kennedy, and rumors circulated that he was cheating on his wife. He denied these allegations, even telling the press that if they didn't believe him, they could follow him around if they wished. He claimed he had nothing to hide. However, within a month, the Miami Herald published photos of his young secretary sitting in his lap on his boat, ironically named Monkey Business. He ultimately lost the nomination to Michael Dukakis, who was seen as a less compelling candidate. Story 45. My current situation. Last July, I was active and healthy and had been for 10 years consistently. I coached and competed in a martial art, worked out every day, cooked and prepared all my own food, and was extremely goal-driven, motivated, and disciplined. After a bad shoulder injury that left me nearly immobile without pain medication or assistance for 3 to 4 months, I lost my job, my flat, and my routine, which kept me sane. During those months, I relapsed, smoking cigarettes and marijuana, eating unhealthy food, and I am now living in supported accommodation and in debt. Thankfully, I don't really like drinking, so that hasn't been an issue. It's been 8 months now, and I am struggling mentally, but I am pushing through. I've just had a small surgery, and by May 1st, I should be able to get back to a place of better mental and physical health. All this happened just as I moved to a new country by myself, so I didn't know anyone or my way around. No excuse, but it was easier to fall into bad habits without structure, routine, or even a familiar face. Story 46. A friend of mine came aboard the ship during the weekend. No one was on board except for the duty watch, which included 12 people out of a total of 225. He set off fireworks in the aft part of the ship. While the rapid response team dealt with that situation, he went forward and one deck up to break down the commanding officer's cabin door, obviously unaware of the chaos. They stopped him shortly after realizing what was happening. We were close, and he was genuinely a great guy. I have no idea what caused the incident or what happened to him afterward. It was too early in my career to be part of the informed circle. Story 47. I have been in a cycle for about 5 or 6 years of not doing anything. Laundry, dishes, changing clothes, and so on. I feel like a difficult person to look at and be around. Story 48. I might be in the same place right now. It's a lot, and I feel just like you did about not wanting to do a single task, even typing this out. Story 49. I became deeply involved in the drug dealing world. I started off as a small-time marijuana dealer to make extra money, but it spiraled into something bigger than I intended. I was making about $50,000 a month for 3 years. I quit my job, and drug dealing became my full-time career. I became addicted to the adrenaline rush from it. I hardly ever used any substances other than alcohol and cocaine occasionally. I made the amount I wanted for my nest egg, and yet I never quit. I just kept growing that amount. I started buying everything in cash: cars, vacations, and buried cash in the backyard. Pretty much anything I wanted. One year, I checked my credit cards and realized I spent over $50,000 on random items, not even including everything I paid for in cash. Then one day, I received a wiretap alert, and my life was turned upside down. I was hit with 14 felonies and faced a sentence of up to 140 years. Of course, I knew that my charges would be plea bargained down, but it was still terrifying to read that on the front page of the newspaper. I was sentenced to 18 years but paroled after 5 years and a few months. I lost everything except my house. It felt like the ending of a crime movie without the betrayal. I was extremely depressed throughout my time in prison. I have been out for over 3 years now, and I still feel depressed about it, but it's manageable at least. I experience a lot of anxiety, and I still get paranoid when I see a police officer for no reason. I have no desire to ever return to that life again. Story 50. My drinking became so severe that I would wake up every morning feeling so sick that it felt like self-abuse. Then I would drink again in the evening until I blacked out. This went on for years. I am currently 3 years and 9 months sober. Story 51. I was playing a game and we were on the last level when one of my friends left too early. I didn't make it back to the truck in time, so I blew up. Story 52. I have always been a very outgoing and hyperactive child. In middle school, after a really difficult friendship breakup in 6th grade, I completely shut myself off and practically swore myself into silence. By the next year in 7th grade, I was done with it, but I had lost all my social skills, which was frustrating. The following year, I moved to a different state, and the beginning was horrible until a group of misfits adopted me. It still took me a couple more years to stop being terrified of meeting new people. Story 53. I worked with a colleague who was motivated but unhappy in his job. I was his line manager in the food retail sector and made efforts to help him find opportunities where he could excel. Eventually, he landed a fantastic job, performed well in the interview, and listed me as a reference. I provided him with a glowing review, and he accepted the job offer. The next day, he came into work, handed in his notice, and reacted explosively, insulting everyone and expressing his disdain for the workplace. His new job came with a pay rise, allowing him to finance a new car. However, 3 weeks into his new position, he went to the pub on the weekend, had a few drinks, and used drugs before driving home. He lost control, crashed into a tree, and rolled the car. Bystanders who witnessed the incident rushed to help and detected alcohol on him. He was arrested and charged with driving under the influence, driving with drugs, dangerous driving, and driving without insurance since he hadn't insured the new car. He lost his new job and was told he could not return to his previous role, leaving him without any references to help him find another job. He moved back in with his father, and 4 years later, he is still living there. Story 54. A personal story. I was extremely depressed, anxious, and had a difficult Christmas. I was called in for jury duty the first 2 weeks of the year, and it was awful. I experienced terrible migraines and anxiety during the hearings. At one point, I had to ask for the panel to pause because I thought I might pass out. I had a flawless medical history up to that point, which made it even more alarming. A mistake on my end with recording court hours led to a dispute with my employer over compensation, and I nearly got fired. Since this was my first proper job, that would have been troubling, but I avoided that fate as my boss was sympathetic, and I apologized for my error. Finally, to top it all off, I went out drinking with friends a week later to try to relax from the stress. I drank too much, slipped on paving, and ended up in the hospital with a head injury. I still remember nothing from that night and experienced recurring brain fog for months afterwards. This all happened about 15 months ago. I am doing much better now. I worked hard and received raises in my job, went completely sober after the incident for over 6 months, and significantly improved my overall drinking habits and health. I quit smoking, stopped vaping, and started eating a much better diet. While I am still recovering, it feels great, especially knowing how close I was to completely destroying my life. I have not mentioned any of this to anyone I know in real life before, not even my parents, friends, or housemates. I prefer to keep it behind me. Story 55. My best friend's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and he had just earned his bachelor's degree in science and bought a Cadillac. He was a smart guy, but he liked to party. When he found out about his mother's diagnosis, he lost his mind and became addicted to opiates, cocaine, and eventually fentanyl. In the midst of this, his mother went into full remission and survived, but my best friend would go missing for days. I received calls in the morning and at night, and I had to reach out to find out if he was still alive. From 2021 to 2022, he was in active addiction and must have gone to about 50 different types of institutions, including jail, detox, rehab, and psychiatric wards. It was heartbreaking to see him get worse and worse. He would travel to the East and West Coasts looking for a fix. No one would have thought he would end up that far down the path of addiction. On Christmas Eve 2022, his father picked him up from a homeless shelter in California. He used to live a few blocks away from me in New York before I moved. He was put on Suboxone, and he hasn't used opiates in years, but he still can't stop drinking and smoking marijuana. During his addiction, he became homeless, was robbed, beaten, and abused. When I saw him in 2023, his morals were gone, and he was dull. In every sense of the word, he was a shell of his former self. He has post-traumatic stress disorder from everything he has experienced, and it seems like he has lost all hope. I don't know if he understands right from wrong anymore. I never thought he would fall as far as he did. He was my best friend from kindergarten. He's 30, and I'm 29, soon to be 30 next month. Watching him fall into such depths crushed my soul. I was supposed to be the one who struggled, not him. Now, as I've become successful through manual labor and investing, he is wasting away, eating food from cans and weighing roughly 300 pounds. It saddens me that I can't have him in my house anymore. I can't trust him. I don't know if he will steal, have a PTSD episode, go manic, or do something reckless. I told his mother that it should have been me who got addicted to opiates and not him. He had a really promising future. I'm just a person with little work experience and some luck. Feels like his life ended at 25. Story 56. When I was 14 and severely depressed, I felt overwhelmed. I struggled with an eating disorder, self-harm, and a tendency to run away. I engaged in a lot of self-sabotage because I was afraid to get better. Story 57. I watched a friend drink himself to death and often sold him liquor. I didn't realize he was suicidal until it was too late. Story 58. I am going through a tough time. Unfortunately, I have been pursuing someone who has been mistreating me. I keep believing him despite his erratic behavior. The ups and downs, along with having the future I desire dangled in front of me, while feeling disrespected, have all contributed to my depression. Story 59. The years I spent playing RuneScape and World of Warcraft were not entirely my fault. From 2001 to 2020, I spent all of my free time playing these games. I failed high school not once but twice. Yes, I had to take an extra senior year and ended up failing that as well. I took an online class that I neglected to complete. I had a year to finish it but didn't, and then I forgot about it until the last month it was due. Everyone in my 2004 graduating class was out living their lives while I was stuck at home on the computer. I didn't get a job until 2010 because of this and the recession. I had almost no money at 25. Even then, I stayed up all hours of the night, sometimes getting only 4 to 6 hours of sleep. This continued for years. I felt a bit of existential dread knowing I was wasting my life on these two games. I spent time thinking everything would just fall into place for me, but I wasn't present in my own life in a situation where things could actually fall into place. The dread got to the point where every time I played, I yelled at myself that this did not serve a purpose. I left World of Warcraft when the grind for an item was time-gated, requiring that you spend several hours a week grinding out quests and defeating monsters for a key that gave you a chance to upgrade your item twice a week. Even when I got an office job in information technology, I would go to bed at 12:30 on Sunday night, wake up at 6, and slowly 12:30 would turn into 2 a.m. over the course of the week, each night getting less sleep. This went on for years. In the few times I was present in my life, I was able to spend time with my niece, who is 25 to 30 years younger than me. She hung on my every word, asked many questions, and was inquisitive, just like I was at her age. I felt close to her, and I can say she is the only family member I have felt close to in a long time. One day, my mom came home to say my niece was getting in trouble for reading at school, just like you used to. Then another day, she said my niece had been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I started seeing memes about ADHD and neurodivergence traveling in packs. 3 years later, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I started taking medication and making changes in my life. After a year of being present and going out to meet people, I was able to meet a wonderful partner. I still feel behind, but now I understand why, and I've been working hard to catch up. Gaming itself isn't bad, but when it consumes all your time, it becomes a problem. I still game, but now I have priorities to take care of first. I no longer sit at home on weekends gaming from Saturday morning to Sunday night. Story 60. Friend is essentially Reddit personified. He believes everyone else is less intelligent and considers himself the smartest person around. If you try to tell him otherwise, he digs in deeper to prove his point. He earned a Master of Business Administration and secured a job trading options for a small fund with minimal trading activity. This was in the early to mid-2000s, when the stock market was relatively stable. He sold puts on the volatility index, meaning he sold insurance against market volatility. He performed well for a few years because there was little volatility. One day, the market crashed, and his puts incurred losses. Since he had been doing well before the crash, he convinced himself it was just a minor oversight and believed he saw the crash coming. He lost his job due to the market crash but thought he had figured out the formula. He believed if he could start a hedge fund and prove he could consistently outperform the market, he would become a billionaire as investors would flock to him. Having attended a prestigious school and being socially adept, he attracted some play money, amounting to $50,000. He was selling insurance in the form of options. Every 3 to 4 years, he outperformed the market, then lost significant amounts when things turned south. Each time, he had an excuse for why he couldn't sell at the right moment. "Oh, I was sick that one day, but I can see where I should have sold." He convinced himself that the insurance payout was simply bad luck. He avoided taking a day job to monitor the market constantly. When I suggested automating the process, he replied, "No, you can't automate it. It's just something I can see." He continued this for 15 years, from age 30 to 45. During the last downturn, he not only lost the entire $50,000 but also had to ask his clients for more money to cover his losses. Eventually, he realized his approach wasn't working. For 15 years, during his prime adult years, he sat in front of a screen, convinced that his brilliance would yield results. He acted like a future billionaire while essentially being unemployed and without a social life, choosing to only associate with elites because he didn't want to lower himself. He squandered money. As a self-proclaimed hedge fund manager needing to impress clients, he felt compelled to buy a new Lexus. Now in his late 40s, he has no family, no career, and is struggling to get by. Story 61. I worked with a young man who had intense resentment towards his father. His family was financially well off, to the extent that they claimed money was not a concern when he applied for graduate schools. However, he expressed wishes for his father to be dead and shared various negative feelings. This individual had not worked much previously, and he was often awkward, mean, and unpleasant to be around. I believed much of his behavior stemmed from self-hatred. My role was to assist him in developing basic life skills, such as cooking, cleaning, and job applications. I constantly reminded him that he had opportunities and various resources available, including family connections willing to help him obtain necessary equipment, health professionals to assist with weight loss, and therapists. Much more support than the average person receives. My main objective was to help him achieve his goals, and he often stated that he wanted to be a better version of himself. Still, he blamed his father for everything. What did his father do? He largely stayed out of his son's affairs and declined to build a separate apartment for him on their property. The reason was that he wanted his son to become self-sufficient, find work, and successfully transition to graduate school. The young man directed all his anger at his father, and they frequently argued in my presence. I attempted to explain that he couldn't change his father, only himself, and that his parents' reluctance to provide additional support was intended to help him grow into the person he aspired to be. However, he never accepted responsibility for his actions and blamed the world for his failures. I presented him with healthy meal recipes and exercise plans, even offering to join him whenever I was available. I also offered to assist him in cleaning his room, which was a significant issue. He did not know how to clean and insisted that a maid should handle it. He made no effort to change. He continually complained about his father, claiming he would feel or do something only once his father was gone. All he needed to do was try even just a little. Instead, he ultimately decided to let me go. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.